Wow!
Shipping cubs like Orion. Next, Fox 10 investigates.
The facility was adequate.
Adequate doesn't sound like much of a ringing endorsement.
It was at one time the star attraction of the World Wildlife Zoo in the West Valley, Orion, the tiger cub. And like other cubs born there, he received his fair share of the spotlight.
But tonight, Fox 10 investigates and sheds some light on what happens to these tiger cubs like Orion once the cameras go away. Well, surprisingly, many don't remain at the zoo.
And where they end up has a lot of people worried about the future of the species.
Tonight, Steve Kraft puts in focus the travels of one tiger cub.
It takes about two and a half years for them to reach maturity.
This is a story about Orion, cute enough to make 3 appearances on Fox 10 Arizona Mornings.
He's already 20 pounds. Yeah. And he's fully clawed and toothed and strong.
The first time I ever saw Orion was on Fox 10 Arizona Morning.
This is also a story about someone who stood up for Orion. Carol Urban is an engineer by trade. Her passion is photography.
I ended up going to a World Wildlife Zoo, and I'm an amateur photographer, so I decided I wanted to take his photos. Shots of him playing, shots of him sleeping.
The tiger cub was born in April at the Wildlife World Zoo, just west of Phoenix. Not an unusual event. In fact, 13 tiger cubs have been born there since 2007.
Well, let's be clear. We don't just breed tigers for the sake of breeding tigers.
While trying to hold on to a 5-foot alligator, we met with Wildlife World Zoo Director of Conservation, Dr. Grace Stafford, and owner Mickey Olson.
Our mission here is to create a family environment that's friendly and a place where children and parents and grandparents can learn about animals and learn to appreciate them.
Well, good luck in PA.
Thank you.
All right, good to see you, Dr. Dre, and that's the final time we'll see you.
That's it. Not all the tigers born at Wildlife World Zoo stay there. After his last appearance on Fox 10, Orion hit the road. He was a featured guest on a talk show in Los Angeles. Then he was given to a small zoo in the mountains of northeastern Pennsylvania called Claws and Paws. Here's video of him playing in his enclosure last August. Carol Urban watched it with us.
He has one little ball to play with. He has no water. Tigers love to climb and play in water, and I don't see any water for him.
The exhibits are inappropriate. They do not meet his needs as a species.
The video was shot by an investigator from One World Conservation after Carol Urban called looking for help. She didn't think Orion was in a good home.
One World Conservation has built a campaign around Orion.
Carrie Kearns runs it.
We would like to have Orion confiscated. This is to us is kind of an upscale petting zoo.
Neither Olson nor Stafford viewed the video from Claws and Paws. Olson said he's been there.
Well, I personally visited Claws and Paws about 3 to 4 years ago, and I thought their facility was adequate.
Adequate doesn't sound like much of a ringing endorsement of the place. We also asked, is Wildlife World Zoo responsible for animals they give away? Not exactly, according to Stafford.
We have to put our faith into our regulating body, which is the USDA. And actually, the process works because, trust me, if someone has a complaint, the USDA responds in a timely fashion.
The United States Department of Agriculture, or USDA, does regulate zoos, including small roadside zoos like Claws and Paws. When they find something wrong, the USDA writes a citation.
The ones that they did have had to do with it being primarily a zoo in the forest. So they have a well forested site, and there were a few fences. Did a tree limb had come down in a windstorm?
There is a USDA complaint about a downed tree trunk at Claws and Paws. But we also found this about expired medication. Quote, the use of expired medical material on regulated animals is not considered to be acceptable. Another report for the petting zoo. It found numerous holes in the wood on the back outer wall exposing nail heads and pieces of jagged wood. This one for a sick beaver in capybara. The notice says the animals need to be brought to the attention of the attending veterinarian to provide adequate veterinary care. In all fairness, the reports do not include information on how soon the zoo followed up, but they clearly provide snapshots of what's going on at the zoo. And there are 43 of them since 2003.
They do a good job educating the public in the Scranton area.
Maybe so. Most zoos are educational. But what about this? A warning notice from the USDA to Vincent Hall, the owner of Claws and Paws, for, quoting now, failure to construct a facility of such material and of such strength as appropriate for the animals involved.
What really concerns me is I look at this cage and it's like, that's the size of my garage.
Besides appealing for Orion's removal, One World Conservation just filed complaints about this camel with a nasty-looking knee and a leopard with what appears to be some sort of skin disease.
There was a black female leopard. She's 6 to 8 years of age, and her condition is pretty horrendous. She needs immediate vet care.
If we were to find that a facility was chronically not meeting up to its obligations, not just to us, but to the animals themselves, then we would take corrective action.
This is Vincent Hall holding Orion last July, the day of his arrival. He had no response to our questions about the USDA reports, and he declined any comment on camera.
With Orion being so young, and at this time of year, he's going to be coming into the area where he's going to be exposed to extreme temperatures. We're concerned about the shelter and him being exposed to those temperatures.
It does tend to get a bit cold and snowy in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania this time of year. Because of that, Claws and Paws is now closed, but the animals are still there. The owner's son sent us his photo of 2 white tigers blending in well with recent snows. He said off camera that his tigers enjoy the snowfall. And these tigers, now adults, were also donated by Wildlife World Zoo as cubs. The zoo says they're doing just fine.
The shelter's in the background.
And that their staff is fully trained to make sure night house heaters work.
Orion has no one to speak for him. And for some reason, Orion chose me.
Apparently someone was listening. Just days ago, Claws and Paws and Wildlife World Zoo had a change of heart, deciding to return Orion to Wildlife World Zoo. He's there now, under quarantine while his new habitat is ready. Hopefully, he'll have more than a garbage can to play with.
He's just too cute of a little guy.
Wildlife World Zoo and Claws and Paws maintain they've done nothing wrong, that their critics are overzealous animal rights activists, misguided people who don't know the facts about animal care. It's not for us to decide, it's up to you. Maybe you should do your own fact-finding. Check in on Orion later this year. I can promise you, we will. Welcome back, Orion. Both Claws and Paws and Wildlife World Zoo say the only reason Orion is being returned is because Claws and Paws ran out of time and money to build a new enclosure. Orion's had an interesting year, clearly. But when it comes to the tiger trade, he's the lucky one. It's a tourist trap. Some say it's also a tiger death trap.
But what goes on behind closed doors after hours is shocking.
Some tigers are even treated like trash. Next, the unbelievable video exposing what is going on at the so-called Tiger Temple.
The Wildlife World Zoo in the West Valley was eventually given to a small roadside zoo back east, a zoo that had a history of problems. Well, now Orion is coming back to Arizona, but it got us wondering, what else can happen to tigers in captivity? Turns out Orion is one very lucky cat. Steve Kraft continues our special In Focus.
He was the star of Fox 10 News Arizona Morning 3 times. Orion, the Bengal tiger cub, born at Wildlife World Zoo last April.
Well, it doesn't take long for them to grow, does it, Dr. Gray?
But later, Orion was shipped to a small roadside zoo in Pennsylvania called Claws and Paws. Orion's case is not unique. Remember Raja and Nash, 2 tiger cubs named after the Phoenix Suns' backcourt at the time. They were also born at Wildlife World Zoo, and Nash is still there. But Raja ended up at the Texas Landfill Management Company near Dallas. It sounds like the punchline to a bad joke. But as far as we know, Raja is okay. Apparently, the company's owner likes to collect exotic animals. He's not alone.
In the United States, we have, close to 7,000 tigers and exotics that are being bred here.
Carrie Kearns runs One World Conservation. She worries about tigers still in the wild.
If the tigers continue to go the way that they're going, it's very possible that tigers will be extinct in the wild by the time my daughter hits Kids High School.
And the thousands more that live in captivity.
An average person can go and file for a $25 permit with USDA and purchase a tiger cub online for about $400.
Remember what happened in Ohio last month? An exotic animal collector released his animals before killing himself. Several tigers and lions were gunned down by police.
We have many, many more tigers in captivity in the United States than exist in the wild around the entire world.
Adam Roberts is a conservationist with Born Free.
We don't really know what happens to the animals.
Estimates of captive tigers in the U.S. vary wildly. One study counted only USDA licensed cats. It came up with less than 2,000. Other studies have put the number closer to 10,000, reporting more tigers in Texas than exist in the wild. Some are impossible to count, like Smuggler, now in an animal sanctuary called Insync Exotics. At least not while he was in the hands of drug smugglers.
They have a cat there named Smuggler that was brought there not much older than Orion, and he was brought across the border by drug dealers from Mexico.
Even tigers held captive in their native lands don't fare much better. This is the Tiger Temple in Indonesia, a tiger factory where cubs are held in small cages. Conservationists have been trying to shut it down for years.
About 2007, I was over there and I did undercover investigative work.
One World Conservation investigator, Sybil Foxcroft, recorded this video, and she spoke to us from Australia via Skype.
A big part of it is providing education to the public.
The Tiger Temple is a tourist trap where people can see tigers up close. Some allege the animals are drugged first. It's also a death trap for tigers who end up there.
What is presented to the public when they walk through those gates is purely for the public, to allure the public. But what goes on behind closed doors after hours is shocking. The abuse is just incredibly horrific.
It gets worse for unwanted tigers.
Then the animal ends up either in a meat factory, a canned hunting facility.
Canned hunts in some states and parts of Africa are well documented.
Which is really sad because when the animal comes out of the cage to be shot by the hunter, generally they're so humanized that they'll come up and let you pat it before you shoot it.
And certain tiger parts are thought to be medicinal in Asia. Up to $10,000 can be earned on the black market for a tiger's body.
I have no doubt that the wildlife trade is being conducted inside the United States.
How do you stop such blatant animal abuse?
We increase the laws so that if you're abusing, neglecting, trading, killing an endangered species, you go to prison.
In the wild, tigers need more than the law to keep them safe. They need a miracle. In captivity, they need the law to protect them from us. Steve Kraft, Fox 10 News.
Now, Sybil Foxcroft says there are an estimated 3,200 tigers left in the wild, and due to human encroachment, their range from India to Southeast Asia is shrinking each day. To visit her website and for links to the zoos and conservation groups that we talk to, go to myfoxphoenix.com.